hated Fidel Castro. I remember that. Then also, way back when, oh yes, Dr. X beats Vern Gagne in the National Wrestling Association Championship. Wilt Chamberlain had scored 73 points for his first big record in LA basketball. The U.S. began spraying Agent Orange in Vietnam. Jackie Robinson had been the first black to be elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Chubby Checkers, you all remember this one, the famous musician with the twist. Chubby Checkers was banned from all Catholic schools. Peace. Shortly before that, the Gophers had won the Rose Bowl. Dayton's had just opened its first Target. I'm sure all your memories are now slowly drifting back. Frank Sinatra had arranged for a tryst at Las Vegas with JFK and that LA woman, which got J. Edgar Hoover on the alert. There's also the first story surfacing of a CIA plot to kill Castro. And then Bob Dylan had shortly before moved to New York. And the big one was the Lindbergh Terminal had just opened in January of '62. But down to the details, our first film was a film from Argentina called The End of Innocence. And I suppose the things I just cited are strong evidence of having lost our innocence, which sort of kept going down for about the last half century until we're at where we are today. Because it was a great half century, certainly maybe not as we perceive it in our day-to-day big buzzing confusions that surround us, but if you start looking at the histories of this ill-lamented 20th century, the last 50 years becomes very significant in who we are and where we came. So right off the bat, some of our first films were really catch-up. Why did we start this? Well, of course, we all felt a need to catch up, sort of repair our provinciality. There were very few art houses in the Twin Cities. There was Suburban World, there was the Campus Theater and the Varsity Theater, and they were run by the Mann brothers. But a lot of the sorts of films that later became daily menu for us were not available or were not being shown. I guess it was started, well, I guess I don't want to, in a way, I guess I thought in my vanity, what was good for Al Milgrom was good for the U Film Society or the university campus. So aside from that, I've always been interested in visual media. I used to get interested in photography way back when. And actually, I'm working on 3 documentaries right now in addition. The community needed something like this, I felt, and I think it did prove that point. We started right off the bat showing films about twice a week at the Bell. I really do want to thank the university for all of their in-kind support, because if we didn't have the Bell and the 35mm equipment, we couldn't have shown a lot of these. One of the early genres or early tastes was the Polish film school. So that was one of our staples, and of course the French New Wave, which was now, had come into its own with the big 1959 Cannes Film Festival, the debut of Hiroshima Mon Amour, the works of Jean-Luc Godard, and all of the other luminaries of that group. But very shortly we segued into Minneapolis filmmakers. we had a sort of one evening Minneapolis filmmakers. Speaking of Minneapolis and the locals, I owe a debt of thanks. We all do to the photography and arts, the art department at the U through Alan Downs and Jerry Liebling. And then the late George Amberg, who was one of these sort of spooky foreign imports after World War II from the Frankfurt Sociology School. He wanted to start a department of theater, film, and the arts here, but he got shot down around 1965 by one of the, well, very nice guy, E.W. Zebarth, who was the head of CLA at the time. Anyway, that never happened. George went on to NYU, formed the graduate school, later became the Tisch School, and graduated people like Martin Scorsese and his a bunch of his friends in New York. So, without going into the very early schedules further, if you want to see the list of all the films, week to week, night to night, it's available up to about 1987. The point is, if you ask any of you here, what do you remember? You say, you remember a lot of things, but maybe not as specific. But I know when I show this list in the particulars to some of the respective members here, oh, then they remember, yeah, I think I first started dating Marilyn. What was her last name? Oh, I remember, yeah, having to drop my exams and get over to see this movie. But it was quite a community, and I think it's mainly, and it's not just baby boomers, but the 60s and 70s ethos in Minneapolis was certainly abetted and pushed by the films that were run right off the bat. And I have to admit, it wasn't just stuff that you pick up at Minneapolis. You'd have to read Jonas Mekas' Cine Magazine, Film Quarterly, what's around in the U.S., and that formed our taste. We always depended, and a great deal we still do. You look at Walker, you look at Guthrie, we depend a lot on international taste now, and this was proven or showed up at this time too. So very shortly we started running through things that were gaps. Luis Buñuel became a favorite. The American directors, Orson Welles, Raoul Walsh, John Huston. I don't know how many times Beat the Devil was shown. I know Timmy Grady here, that was one of his favorites. For him and Tommy, they kept saying, let's bring that back. And then there was one early in the 60s, 63, I don't know if some of you remember that. There was that 6-hour Japanese movie in 3 parts called The Human Condition. That did catch a lot of attention. It was really one of the strong anti-war films of the time. Some of you remember the one hero who went through the Sino-Japanese War and then ended up in Manchuria as the Russians came in 45. Anyway, Kobayashi's movie, some of you may remember. And then, The Human Condition, one of the first sort of blockbuster films. Of course, many of you remember The Tree of Wooden Clogs, My Life as a Dog. These films ran for weeks and weeks. Certainly, Tree of Wooden Clogs. It turned out that I met a college professor a couple of weeks ago, teaches Italian in Indiana. He shows it to his class, and they fall asleep in 10 minutes. There's history there. It's all in all, if you look back, it was very good for the community. I'm sure certainly it was good for us who were film buffs, and it did more than just satisfy this desire for what's it called? Not voyeurism. Freud's got a term, short-term memory loss. I'll think of it in about 20 minutes. Anyway, it's that we needed to know about what was happening, and television was just coming into its infancy to boot, or it was getting a little better. And I often felt that many international movements were anticipated by the titles. The titles of watching the Russian movies told you well in advance that perestroika was going to be coming fairly down the road pretty soon. Glasnost, the fall of the German Wall. You could also already receive reverberations, even in the early films of Herzog and Wenders. So, you know, it's all part of what we need to know to get around in the world. And that's about it. Now the film program's in the hands of the several changes we've gone through, from the old Youth Film Society to the Oak Street, now to the St. Anthony Main, and in the very good hands of Susan Smolowski, the new executive director. And I just hope that the future takes a bit of the past and at some point tries to further what we already wanted over these 50 years. So thank you all for coming.